All right. Hello, everyone. Greetings. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday for our ninth installment of LBDA's 2024 Community Webinar Series. And our theme this year is Empowerment Through Education. My name is Julia Wood, and I'm the Director of Professional and Community Education here at the Lewy Body Dementia Association. And it's my pleasure to be here with you to host this discussion. So today we are honoring National Women's Health Week. And so we're going to shift our focus today to our women in the community. And this year's theme for that campaign is empowering women, cultivating health, celebrating voices, wellness, and resilience. And it's dedicated to empowering women to take charge of their health journeys and shining a light also on the health issues that are unique to women. And that's what we'll be talking about today, is some of the unique aspects of LBD for women in our community. So we're going to celebrate the strength, determination of women who have taken control of their health and are working to foster an environment where all women feel supported and empowered to speak up about their health needs and concerns. And I think you will find today that our presenter and panelists are doing just that. So I encourage you to visit the website for some great information and resources. So before we get started, a few words about the Lewy Body Dementia Association. We're a national nonprofit whose mission is to optimize the quality of life for those affected by Lewy body dementias. And we work to do this by accelerating awareness, advancing research for early diagnosis and improved care, and by providing comprehensive education and also compassionate support. So a few housekeeping items that we want to take care of before we get started. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, or you have a toolbar where you have a show captions. And so you can select that on your Zoom toolbar at any time during the presentation to launch your closed captioning feature. There's also a resources icon, you'll notice, on that same toolbar, which has some downloadable resources and links that we thought might be of interest with today's presentation. You are welcome to submit your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A icon. Following Dr. Bayram's presentation and a panel discussion today, we will address some questions from the audience for about 15 minutes. This presentation is being recorded. We know we get a lot of questions about that. So you will receive an email in about a week with the link to view the recording. So to watch any of the recordings of our past webinars, you can visit our YouTube channel at LBDA TV, and Rose will drop a link in the chat for that. So lastly, when you leave the webinar today, please take a moment to fill out a brief survey. And so we're just looking for your feedback about today's presentation, and we also use this to inform our future content. So we want to hear from you. So let's learn a little bit more about you now and who's in our audience today. So Rose is going to launch a polling question that you can answer on your screen. So you'll notice we're curious if you're a person living with LBD or has LBD symptoms, if you're a care partner, and that would include our spouses, our care partner spouses in the audience. Are you a healthcare provider? Maybe you're a family or friend, or maybe you're a researcher or scientist. So we'll take a second here and look. All right, so it looks like here we've got about 19% of you are people living with Lewy. We've got about 31% care partners in the audience. We've got about 12% healthcare providers. 23% of you are friends or family members. Thank you for joining us too. We've got about 4% researchers and 12% other. So excellent. We welcome you all. All righty. So now let's introduce our presenter for today. There we go. I'll kind of let you look at the results before I stop them here. There we are. All right. So Dr. Ece Bayram is a project scientist at the Parkinson and Other Movement Disorders Center at the University of California in San Diego. She was born and raised in Adana, Turkey, the city famous for its kebabs. She obtained her MD, I always want a kebab when I read her bio, in 2013, and her PhD in neurosciences in 2017 from Ankara University in Turkey. She spent 1 year at the Lurovo Brain Center for Brain Health in Las Vegas and 2 years at the University of California, San Diego in her postdoc fellowship. Her current research and why she's here to talk to us today is focused on sex, gender, ethnic, and racial differences in neurodegenerative Parkinsonian dementias. And as a clinical researcher, she's committed to research, education, and outreach to advance the field of neurodegenerative Parkinsonian disorders and to raise awareness and support for the community. So thank you so much, Dr. Bayram, for joining us.
Thank you. All right.
So I will exit and let you take it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. I am very excited / anxious to get things started. We have an amazing panel today, so I'm going to keep it a little short to give more time to the panel ladies over here. All right. So I'm going to dive into some research for starters, but I do want to put that disclaimer out before I dive into any of the things I'm going to talk to you about. The research I'm going to present today, I want you to take that with a grain of salt, because these studies are going to be biased by who was included in the studies, who was eligible to be included in the studies, what was the study design, how the study was conducted. This is in no way to say, hey, the way you experience disease is normal, abnormal. We do recognize that everyone living with Lewy body dementia experience different things. So the research may not represent your experience, or you may find that it definitely represents your experience. I'm not sure. It is in no way our purpose to dictate this is what your experience should be. It's not our job to tell you what you should be going through, what you should be feeling, but we just want to offer an insight into what we know so far in terms of research. And as Julia mentioned, I'm from Turkey. I'm from the southern part of Turkey, so I like giving a shout out to my hometown. As you can see in this picture, that's my hometown. All right. So, of course, before I give you any findings, I want to make sure we speak the same language. When I bring out a term, I want to make sure it's coming across the way I intend to. We're going to talk about women's experiences, but we have these two terms that come into play when we look into women-men differences while doing research. So we have the sex grouping and the gender grouping. So the sex grouping represents the biological variable, where we have different anatomies, different things happening inside your body. Your genetics looks different, your hormone profiles look different, whereas gender is based on social, cultural norms. It varies over time, it varies from place to place. The way gender is defined in the US may not look the same as it is defined in Turkey, for instance. So want to be mindful of that too. There is a lot of research that uses these terms interchangeably, even though they shouldn't be used interchangeably. But I didn't know that sex and gender were two different things until I came to the States and actually started speaking a bit more English and understanding English a bit better. So just putting it out there. I will mention if something was specifically done looking at females, males, sex differences, or gender, women, men, but just so we're on the same page. You may already know this, but just a quick reminder, Lewy body dementia is the umbrella term that includes Parkinson's disease dementia and dementia with Lewy bodies. There are a lot of studies looking into these two things separately, and there are also a lot of studies looking at the umbrella term. I'm going to focus on the umbrella term for today, so I'll be inclusive of both sides of things. And before I mention any risk, cause, etc. related stuff, I want to remind you, we don't really know the cause of Lewy body dementia just yet. So when we talk about cause, it has to be both necessary, you have to have it for every people living with this disease, and it has to be enough. So if you have something, a specific factor that turns out in people, it's enough. You don't need anything else. It's going to cause the disease. Whereas risk factors, it's usually not enough. You know, you can drive your car every day and you can get into an accident at times. That's the risk factor. You're not getting into an accident each time you drive your car. It's not necessarily a cause at all times. It's just the risk factor. But if you do get into an accident and you were driving your car, then that will be the cause. So I want you to remember that while we're going through, because I'm going to mention that male sex is associated with a higher risk for Lewy body dementia. It doesn't mean that females don't get it. It doesn't mean that women don't have it. They have it too. It's just that male sex has been associated with a higher risk, and it's just a risk factor, but it's not a cause. So right now for the diagnosis, we rely on the clinical symptoms that we see. We look at people, we ask about their experiences, we hear about what clinical features they might be experiencing. And based on that, we come to a conclusion that the profile looks like Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's disease dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, or if you're not sure of which started first, did the motor symptoms start first, did the cognitive issues start first, then we can group you under the Lewy body dementia in general. But accuracy isn't great. At the clinic, we do miss a lot of people. Misdiagnosis can occur. People can go called something else that's not Lewy body dementia, or people may not even come to the clinic at all. They may not be reporting their symptoms to anyone at all. It happens too. So we miss a lot of people. And right now, our gold standard for a definite diagnosis where we're 100% certain it was definitely Lewy body dementia is by pathology. So when someone passes away and if they donated their brains and their brains get examined under the microscope and we see these Lewy body pathologies, then we're going to know for sure, yep, it was indeed Lewy body pathology, Lewy body dementia. Otherwise, we're pretty much guessing and we're not that reliable. If we look at the research so far regarding how women and men experience the disease, by the way, those are my grandparents, we see that there is a lot of sex and gender differences. We built these knowledge we have right now, and we say it's usually the data that comes from men that have built the knowledge base we have in Lewy body dementia. And there's a problem with that. If you focus on a specific group a bit too much, then that specific group is deriving a lot of the knowledge. And this is our issue when it comes to the Lewy body dementia field, unfortunately. Women get underrepresented. We don't get to hear about their experiences too much. But even based on that small group of women that did make it their way into the research, we do know there are indeed differences. So if you look at the sex aspect, we see that misdiagnosis is more common. They experience the pathology. The pathology is there for them, but it doesn't show up as the typical Lewy body dementia clinic we expect. It shows up like that more in males. It just doesn't show up as much like that females. And they get diagnosed with something else. They may have as much Lewy body pathology as males do, but they may get diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease instead, for instance. And that's a misdiagnosis. We're missing those people. And women tend to show up at the doctor's office, at the healthcare provider's office later in their dementia. So they have a risk of getting diagnosed late, a delayed diagnosis, which is going to impact their lives, their future planning, and it's going to put them at a higher risk for having a lower quality of life as the disease is progressing. And if you look at the individual symptoms too, we do see that for females, women, REM sleep behavior disorder is less common, the acting out the dreams. And there may be a bunch of different reasons for that, but one of them is because your bed partner usually reports if you're acting out your sleep or not. And women tend to have smaller movements when they're acting out their dreams. If they have REM sleep behavior disorder, they don't have as violent dreams as men, and they have smaller movements. They're not necessarily punching or kicking their bed partner, but they're maybe making small movements and their bed partner doesn't notice and the bed partner doesn't report it. So they get under-recognized. Parkinsonism, the movement issues seem to be less common for women, and also the treatment for those motor issues seems to be also less common in women. Smell loss is one of the predictors we can use for Lewy body dementia. It's not 100% guarantee. If you have smell loss, you're not doomed to get Lewy body dementia, but it can make you think, all right, there may be Lewy body dementia in the future. It is less common in women, but depression is more common in women. And if you think about it, depression is a pretty burdensome symptom, and we tend to see it more for women. And something else we have to think about when we talk about sex gender is, apart from the person living with Lewy body dementia, it impacts the care partner side too. Since we see men have a higher risk of Parkinson's disease dementia and dementia with Lewy bodies, and the care partners are usually spouses, we tend to see women in the role of care partner more. But even if we look at women living with Lewy body dementia, they tend to have more women as their care partners, caregivers too. So in general, if you look at it from the care partner side, it looks like the women in the society are helping out the people living with Lewy body dementia a bit more than the men. So why are there sex differences? Why are there gender differences? You know, we are seeing these consistent differences, and what may be causing them? So I want to get your opinion on this. So I listed a couple of ideas, and I want to see what you guys think. You know, it's not a knowledge test. I'm not gonna say you're right, you're wrong, but I want to see what you think might be the major driving factor for these differences that I just mentioned. And I'll give you some time to dive into the poll. If you're not sure, feel free to just guess. This is not a knowledge test. I'll mention that again. All right. This is interesting. Okay, it's lovely to see the thoughts around everyone, because the fact is, we don't know. We're not sure. Genetics. We don't have a lot of genetic risk factors that are defined for Lewy body dementia, but in that small group of risk factors, we do see there are sex differences. Some certain risk factors seem to be more common for males and more impactful for males, whereas different risk factors may be showing up for females. We have been seeing those in this research so far. If you think about the underlying pathology, there are sex differences for that. We see Alzheimer's co-pathology a bit more for females, and once Alzheimer's gets into the play, it likes taking the center stage, and it no longer looks like Lewy body dementia, even though there's Lewy body pathology happening. So females tend to get that Alzheimer's co-pathology more, but even when females and males have similar Lewy body pathologies, females are just not showing that typical phenotype we expect as much. So the pathology prevalence and also the impact seems to be different for females and males. Environments, we don't know. There aren't a lot of knowledge out there on it, but looking at Parkinson's studies, we do know that some occupation-related stuff may be more common for males. For instance, pesticides is a risk factor for males for Parkinson's, and perhaps that may be more common for males. Social determinants are things that matter a lot. At times, we don't focus on them in research, but they're very important. If you think about education, it's usually a protective factor for dementia. And we know disparities from a long time coming. Men experience disparities a bit less. Women, and I didn't even go into sexual and gender minorities, they experience discrimination, they experience disparities more, and they even experience discrimination while receiving healthcare. And we did see that experiencing discrimination while receiving healthcare increases people's risk for getting dementia. So women may be at a higher risk in terms of these social determinants. Hormones can come into play. We see that after usually around the age of 75, men and women risk for Lewy body dementia seems to be a bit more balanced, whereas up to the age of 75, so before you get 75, women seem to have a lower risk. So maybe a late menopause effects may be happening in there. And also, you know, if you have such a complex disease, you always have to think about it's probably not just one thing. There's probably bunch of different stuff coming into play, and it may be that different stuff coming into play look different for females, males. So we're doing a study for the environmental aspect of things. I shamelessly am giving a quick plug for that study. I named it after a series of mountains in my hometown. I kept it personal. And if you see the flyer, my grandparents and my partner's grandpa are on it too. So I want to know, does environment play a game? How does hormones maybe coming into play? So we're running this small survey study. It's a pilot study funded by the Lewy Body Dementia Association, the one-time survey. And so far, we've been okay with getting men with Lewy body dementia, but we still need women with Lewy body dementia. And we've been okay with getting controls that are for women, but we still need men as controls. So if you were interested, feel free to dive in. And why do we care about these? Well, because we know the community cares. The most important thing when you're doing research is addressing people's needs. It's not because I really enjoy doing this research. It's because people want answers. We all want to get to the end point of curing this disease, getting rid of this disease, but as we're trying to get there, people also want to know what is happening in their brains, what tests can help diagnose, how does the disease progress. This was a survey done by the Lewy Body Dementia Association, our community engagement group, and we asked about research priorities, and we saw that the community really wants answers. And this is what is driving this type of research. And we know that the clinical diagnostic criteria we have right now, they're not as great for women. If women are not showing up with that typical phenotype, it means they're showing up with something else, and we got to understand what they're showing up with, and we got to update our criteria accordingly. And this is important because the treatment trials are going to be based on those clinical diagnostic criteria. And if you don't have good diagnostic criteria as is, then your treatment trials are going to be great. You're not going to get people that need to be in those trials into those trials. They're going to get excluded, and we're not going to get to responses. We're not going to get to have good outcomes for women. And if you do look at the clinical trials so far, we don't really see a lot of women in there. Women aren't included in these trials, so we're not going to be sure of the outcomes, how applicable they are to women. So if you take anything from this talk, I want you to remember that women with Lewy body dementia are currently underrepresented in research, and we can all change that. We can all contribute to that. All right, so I have a question, another poll. Let's say you wanted to participate in research. You were like, you know what? I don't want women to be underrepresented anymore, and I want my voice to be heard. Do you know how you could find a study, how you could look into what studies are out there, how you could sign up for a study, check out if you're eligible to participate or not? So this is a problem. We do see this. People want to be in research, but they don't know how to participate in research. And this is a big issue. And this is why we're not getting proper representation. So Lewy Body Dementia Association tries to do a good job to give that information to people. And hopefully after this webinar, I'm sure Julia and Rose will share some resources too, so you can feel a bit more comfortable about how to sign up for a study. But you should also remember, on top of you learning about how to signing up for a study, you can make a difference for other people in your community too. We see that a lot of the people know about research, they're interested in research, but they don't hear about the research opportunities. We looked into how things were in an online survey that the Michael J. Fox Foundation is doing, and we saw less than 50% heard about the research opportunities. 50% didn't know where to find a study and sign up, as we saw here too. But majority did say if someone from their community told them about a study, it's gonna make them more likely to sign up. And if they see that the research is linked to an academic institution, it's gonna make them more likely to take part. So this means we play a role, you all play a role in this too, and you can all contribute to getting more and more representation in the field. And I'm gonna end it there. I, of course, want to shout out to everyone that I get to work with, but also all this research, all the knowledge we have so far, not great. We still have a long way to go, but it is all thanks to this community that we're willing to participate in research, that we're willing to selflessly spare their time to contribute to the knowledge. So we are aware that no research gets done without the participants. So want to give that shout out to the community for the most part. And also, you know, I get to work with cool people. I really enjoy what I do. So thanks to all my collabo friends, and my family is always the guinea pigs in everything I do. So thanks to them too. And I'll end my talk with a quick final poll. So I'm curious if you heard anything that surprised you, or if you were like, ah, I knew about all this, you know, this speaks to my experience, or like I had heard it before, not really exciting, not surprising there. I'm curious. All right, well, I'm glad we got some findings that surprised you out to you. And I do hope this was helpful, and I do hope you take something from it, you keep your own hustle going, and you fight for others too a little bit. I know, you know, you may be feeling, hey, I'm living with this disease, or I'm helping take care of my loved one with this disease. I got to do more. Not ideal, but yeah, we all need to do more, and we're all going to do more because this community is worth it. And after me, you're going to get a wonderful panel. So I'll shush to give them the platform, and thank you for checking out what I had to say today.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bayram, for joining us and for all that amazing information and context for our discussion today. And you guys, I just want to echo Dr. Bayram's sentiments too, that, you know, we're learning this is not just in Lewy body dementia too. I have a daughter with autism, and it took her 15 years for us to get the diagnosis. A lot of neurological conditions, MS, Parkinson's, women have a different symptom presentation. We just are different. So I encourage you too to check out the Women's Brain Foundation. They're doing a lot of research and great work of trying to understand these differences so that we can have better outcomes and provide better healthcare for everyone. And that would be including women. Okay. So off my soapbox here, I'd love to bring my panelists in to join me today. So we have an amazing panel for you of women living in our community who are going to join me on screen here. And they have been given the questions ahead of time, just so you know. So they have had time to kind of frame their answers and think about those so that I'm not blindsiding them with anything. All right. And so we've got one more lovely lady coming in here, and then we'll get started. So she is. Hi, Chrisanne. Welcome. Hi, Donna. Hi, Linda. So why don't we give you each a second? And Donna, I'll start with you just because you're first on my screen, just to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Donna Denham. I'm from Northeast Alabama. I was diagnosed with Lewy body disease at the age of 48.
Excellent. And that will definitely come into play with our discussion too, because you've got a couple of outliers there. You're a woman and much younger than we typically expect. So that's a very different experience. And then next up, Linda, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Linda Dominguez, and I live in Los Angeles, California. And I was diagnosed in 2020, and it has been an interesting ride. The diagnosis process was interesting. So,
Absolutely.
and I'm not early onset. I'm 74. So.
Okay. We will definitely get into all of your stories with that. So thank you so much for joining us. All right. And then last, but certainly not least, I'm very tongue-tied today. Chrisanne Moss, welcome. Say a few words.
We will, but we understand tongue-tied. You're in good company, not a problem. My name is Chrisanne Moss, or Let's Moss, some may know. I am in Grand Haven, Michigan, or Naperville, Illinois, and other places. But I was diagnosed, it takes a while. It took about a year and a half, but in 2020, let's say. And it is a journey. And I think I have more to say about that as far as women goes.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
wonderful to be here, especially amongst the other panelists whom I know and really admire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I admire all of you. And that's one thing we've been hearing, you guys, from our community loud and clear, is they really want to hear more from the people living with this. So I'm so glad, and you could all join, and so grateful for your participation today. So we're going to begin at the beginning, shall we, and talk about diagnosis. So, Dr. Bayram pointed out, as we know, the diagnosis with Lewy for so many is a really long and winding road with a lot of potholes. Typically, we find people have to see multiple providers. They may be diagnosed with something else first. Usually it can take, around a year and a half, if not longer, for people to be diagnosed. But she did highlight some of the unique aspects of this for women too, that you guys are even at a higher risk for a delayed diagnosis, and also more often a misdiagnosis with Alzheimer's. So, tell us a little bit about your journey with diagnosis. And do you feel that there was anything kind of in your diagnostic path that was different because you were female? Who wants to start? Chrisanne, you were last there. Do you want to go first? We'll just go backwards.
Well, thank you. Although I know the other stories, so it's almost like, oh, I want to tell Donna's story more. But I think mine is it's almost like a joke you tell in a bar. It's like, 4 neurologists, 3 psychologists, 2 neurosleep studies, and 3 centers of excellence later, I got a diagnosis. But the difference. I think there's opportunity for our healthcare providers for awareness and to learn. And when we know better, we need to do better. And so that's where I think we are, especially with women. Depression, we oftentimes are, well, you're depressed. And in my story, I had reason to be depressed. My brother was gravely ill. And so that was that. And although I may have been depressed at certain times, not like this. I was anxious, I was depressed, and I knew I had behavior changes. And but people would push it off, I said something absolutely inappropriate in a work setting, and everybody said, well, she can bring that out in people. Well, that's maybe true, but I was sent in to calm chaos, and I didn't do that. And So, and I saw myself withdrawing. And so there was many of my symptoms were contributed to other things, maybe associated with women, but maybe just a bit dismissive, because I don't think anybody really wants to find dementia. You know, one of the neurologists said, you know, your right arm isn't swinging. There's something going on. And yet another neurologist said, oh, you probably hurt your shoulder. Oh, your tremor. Well, you just have a little essential tremor. You don't have resting tremors. There was so much back and forth, and yet Lewy is fluctuating. It fluctuates from day to day and within the same day. So I can appreciate that. But it wasn't until my depression was treated and my anxiety was better and my word finding was horrible, and I slugged my husband in the middle of the night. That was a real giveaway. So
yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that and sharing your story. And I think it's so, what I noticed in my practice a lot of times too was, you know, you pointed this out with the healthcare providers being more aware, is I think we really have to listen to that perception of change from baseline. You know, what I'm hearing you say is these things were kind of, oh, well, it could be this, it could be this, but you knew this is different. Something's going on here. This is not the usual for me. And I think that's a really important thing to remember.
And for me, when I couldn't force rank numbers, they were right in front of me, or do tasks that I knew I could do in my sleep, but I could tell someone else how to do them. I was like, okay.
Yes, it's that change from that baseline. And Linda, I see you nodding a lot. Do you want to jump in and add your story?
Sure. My journey wasn't necessarily long, but it was necessarily frustrating. And for me, because of all the fluctuations, you know, between depression and anxiety and balance issues and talking issues and using the wrong words and not being able to remember stuff, and not just why did I walk into the kitchen, but really remembering things that I know. And it's like almost there, but it's not there. I was having trouble with that, but I also found that I had a tremor in my right hand. And so I had gone to I have a HMO, and I had gone to my primary doctor, and I said, you know, I have a lot of different symptoms. This one's troubling because I don't know what that is, the tremor. But, you know, I have these other things that are going on. And she said, okay, I need to send you to a neurologist. So I went to a neurologist, and he said, well, initially he said, well, we can do some tests, you know, it could be this or that or the other thing. He never mentioned Lewy. So the next time I went back, after I had an MRI, the next time I went back, it showed no stroke, no whatever else they were looking for. He said to me, only men get Lewy, because I had said I have a feeling with all these different symptoms that I have that maybe it could be Lewy body dementia. And he said, no, only men get that. And I said, well, let's go over some of the symptoms. So, you know, you can check me on this. Let me go over some of my. He said, I don't have time for that. You're here because of the tremor in your right hand. That's what I'm going to deal with.
Oh,
and
wow.
So that goes beyond dismissive. So that was, I had to find a new neurologist. I had to find somebody who could help me connect the dots. And what I found was Dr. Google was my friend, because that's how I found the Lewy Body Dementia Association, that helped me walk through what some of the symptoms could be. And so then I went back to my HMO, said, give me a different neurologist because this guy isn't going to cut it. And they gave me another guy who's okay, still a little dismissive, but at least he understands Lewy. So that was, that was my journey to getting a diagnosis.
And I love that you really advocated for yourself. That's something we've been talking about a lot in this, this webinar series this year. And I know that's frustrating. We all wish we could just go to the doctor and they would figure it out and solve our problems. But just like, a lot of times you got to try a different plumber. My saying is sometimes you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince or princess. And that, always just keep looking, keep searching, find somebody who will listen to you. And with that, I'm going to bring in Donna here because I'd love to hear, with your age added into it, how your experience may have varied.
My symptoms, both, let me start off by saying both my parents had Alzheimer's, and my mom passed away like months before my symptoms started. So I think initially my husband, like everybody else, thought this is stress because it was a huge, devastating loss. But I noticed that it was almost like when I was in the middle of, like, if I was driving and there was a lot of traffic, the more layers you added to something, the more confused. Like my husband would say, you need to turn left here. And it was like I just didn't know what to do. And I had never struggled with that before. And because of my genetics, we were kind of talking to someone for some, like, what can we do to kind of keep our risk at bay? And when I mentioned that to her, she was like, that's not necessarily normal, and you should have that looked at. And so I saw a neuropsychologist and tested mild cognitive impairment because of ADD. What I have later learned through support groups is that him following that up saying, because he asked, have you ever had that? And we said, no. And he's like, you don't just pop up with that at your age. And I've learned that a lot of people at that point get dismissed that, oh, you've just got ADD, let's move on. So he suggested that we see a neurologist, but it took 3. The first one just dismissed, well, you don't have FTD, and didn't look for anything else, even though when he pulled my husband out in the hall, he was like, well, she's struggling here, here, and here. I had one doctor tell me that I only had mild impairment. I didn't have dementia. He didn't know when I would get dementia, but here's a pill you can take for the rest of your life. And then we ended up with my current neurologist. But I will say I had hallucinations for a long time. And I think that's kind of what solidified. I really feel like my mom had hallucinations, but it is very hard to sit in a physician's office and say, I see things that I know aren't there. I'm awake enough and I can rationalize with myself that they're not real. But I do think being that honest with them, because you do think they're going to think that I have lost all sanity and they're going to lock me up somewhere. But I do think that helped, because that very first visit, he noted, like, okay, this is either Alzheimer's or Lewy body. But it was a fight to get in with him, because they traditionally didn't see patients under 50 years old. So I had to get the chairman's approval. So luckily I had done all the steps and taken all the documentation and was like, you need to see me. Something is, here's my genetics. Here's what they're saying. You need to visit. But it opens up a whole nother can of worms. And I also think if you're having those symptoms that you don't want to tell people about, not only are you like, I was having issues at work where one of my employees was like, well, we had this conversation and I had no recollection of the conversation whatsoever. And I'm thinking, well, it's a stressful job. I was an accountant, we worked at a bank. But yeah, I think just like you said, advocating for yourself and speaking up, even in those symptoms that you think people are going to be like, she's crazy, can make a big difference in how long it takes to get diagnosed.
Very well said. Very well said. Yeah, you've really got to advocate for sure. So you guys, I'm going to skip to number 3 just for the sake of time, because I think this is one that we really want to make sure we hit on. And so, Dr. Bayram noted that caregivers and LBD are more often women, right? And I think culturally, often our caregivers are women. And so last week we all met briefly preparing for this, and you guys really talked to how that traditional role of seeing the woman, as a caregiver has really shifted for you all in your relationships, and you've had to really work on that. So could you please kind of, talk to that, perceived role reversal and how you've had to kind of shift that in your family? And Linda, why don't we let you go first, since you went in the middle last time?
Okay. I am a single woman. I am fiercely independent, and I have always been the carer of others. I have 2 grown children, and they each have 2 grown children. And I have always been the one to care for them, to support them. And so switching, and it's not that they miss me being, more caring. It's that I miss being the caring, doing that. And also, I will say, it's very hard for me to ask for help. And oftentimes for me, it's like I don't ask for help until it has become sort of chaotic. It becomes a problem, and then I ask for help. So that's one of the things I know that I need to find a solution for, because again, as a single woman, I know I will not be able to live on my own forever. I'm going to be needing more help, and I can see that coming down the line. But yeah, I like being the caregiver person. I don't like being the one needing the care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's well said and very true for so many of us, absolutely. And then Chris-Ann, why don't we let you chime in here? Give us your perspective on that.
Well, Linda, you nailed it for women. And I would also add, I think that sometimes, women are the medical providers in their family, like you mentioned. They're the ones that are pushing everybody to go to the doctor, and oftentimes pushing themselves aside. At their own expense, frankly, but that's what we have done. So this is it's a whole new role for the others in our life, that all of a sudden we need their help. And yes, I hate it, and I don't like to ask for it. And and when it comes to relationships, I think again, women often, I can only speak for myself. I spoiled my husband rotten. I did everything. Absent-minded professor kind of guy. And so to take on that role, not everybody has that skill set or temperament, and it's okay. It's no harm, no foul. But I think dealing with the reality of it is very, very important. And I was a part of a webinar about MAID, and it's medical assistance in dying. And I'm not advocating that, but I found it interesting, the really high percentage of the people that choose to have medical assistance in dying, and this was data out of Canada, it was like 80, maybe even 90%, I don't recall the numbers, are women. I can't help but think that plays a role. I think, and I just have to say this because it's my new platform for advocacy, and Donna inspired me because I was heartbroken. We were talking about clinical trials and studies and opportunities, and she said, I can't get into studies because I'm too young. And I know that recent study I read, 87.7% of the people in the trial were men. And I literally rolled up my study and slapped my neurologist over the leg with it. And he's a really great guy and a very strong voice. And I shared my story with him and some of the comments that had been said to you, Donna. And, you know, he said, you're right. It has to change. It's unfair. And that's my new platform. And because it's completely wrong. It's just completely wrong. And Donna, most women don't have hallucinations. So you are unique in that. I should say most. At least we don't know that women present with hallucinations. I had olfactory, which means I can't smell anything, but all of a sudden I would smell really good coffee or something not so good. And also auditory. So I would hear somebody say my name and I would go, you know, and some vision, I've seen like 2 arms or 2 legs. That was really funny, but I had been well prepared for that. So I wasn't frightened, but I also see kaleidoscopes and that's kind of cool. I just close my eyes and wait for it to pass. But you know, we are different, you know, we present differently and it needs to be, we need to look at it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Donna, how about for you?
I would say I have traditionally, my husband owns his own business and he travels a lot. So I have essentially always kind of ran the household. And like they said, I have prided myself in keeping our lives together as to not add stress to him when he's away, worrying about is his family just going to chaos. So it's, you know, and I've shared this some before, he always, and has done it recently, I broke him of it, but it's remind me. And one day I was just like, no, do not ask me anymore to remind you, because one, it makes me feel bad because my short-term memory is just, it's not going to happen. And I think that I don't think he ever thought about the emotional, it was just a reaction for him but we've had to sit down and he is I'm so fortunate because he is a great care partner, but we've had to shift in because historically I've just, you know, taken care of the bills, taken care of the calendars, and it's not that he's not capable, he just has no idea. And so that shift in our family dynamic, as well as just like they said, I'm very independent and don't tell me what to do because I'm not going to do it. And so having to listen to him now be like, because my speech, almost all of my symptoms only come out when I'm really tired. And I've started like really stuttering and I still drive. So if I'm out somewhere and he catches me on the phone and he hears that stutter, he's like, you might want to think about heading home. And then if I'm at home, he's like, I think you need to take a nap. And I'm like, I don't need a nap. You take a nap. but you know, having to like, and there are even situations where we're out because I do have Parkinson's symptoms. So if we go to a restaurant and we get something thick like steak, or I have had to let him cut that, or learn, like tell them, I need you to cut that in the back for me. But I think just when you're that independent, like a lot of us women are, having to step back and think, you know what, he's not just trying to control me and boss me around, he's trying to help. And I know that taking a nap will make me a completely different person. So I think it's kind of shifted that you're not going to tell me what to do, I'm my own person, into, okay, maybe he's right. He's been right a lot of times in the last 20 something years, but actually saying, okay, maybe this isn't, that's hard. That's, you know,
that's a shift in those roles and what you traditionally did. Yeah.
And I think you know, him having to be more hypervigilant and watch, and even watching, because I can tell he's watching from a distance, even when he's traveling, you know, his attention to detail has shifted. So
Yes.
it's a big adjustment for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing that. So with that, we were kind of talking about how, you know, I think it was Chris Ann that mentioned that a lot of times we push off our own symptoms as women and we focus on other people's healthcare. Have any of you found that, you know, you have trouble kind of balancing taking care of yourself versus still kind of focusing on caring for others? And that could be family members, children, grandchildren, pets, you know. So who wants to go first? I'll let you kind of pick who wants to take that one.
I will say that this has given me a big shift in perspective. And my children are grown, and my daughter has small grandchildren. But, you know, I think I've reached the point where I've accepted that there's only so many things I can control about this, and my stress level and worrying about, as we do as parents, and, you know, like, I've given you all the tools you need to make informed decisions. And I've just kind of shifted into a whole different, it ain't about you anymore. This is about me right now, and staying here. That sounds selfish, but I don't feel selfish, because I feel like I've done all the steps to get everybody where they need to be. And, you know, I even do that with toxic people. I just, you know, I have told somebody recently, like, who was trying to kind of be confrontational. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. Thank you, but no. And then you wonder why you've not done that your whole life, because it's so freeing. And you're not really being ugly, but for me, it's given me just almost a sense of entitlement. Like, you know what, I can focus on myself because this is very important right now.
Yes.
So I've taken that burden off myself to take care of everybody else. And then at the same time, I found out that my husband has threatened my children, like, you don't stress your mother out or I'm coming after you. So I have that advocate.
You're getting lots of applause and hearts over here flying up. So I think that's a popular one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Linda or Chris Ann, anything you want to add to that?
I'll just add to that. I too have, I wish I had learned it at 48. I have finally accepted the fact that it's okay to put myself first. It's okay. And so I don't need to do anything other than what's right for me today. And I don't need to feel guilty or regret it or be sad about it. I every morning when I get up, I say to myself, what do I want to do with today? What's my intention for today? And my primary intention is always to accept whatever comes. Just to accept it, just to sort of lean into it. And if that means I need to not do anything today, then that's what I do.
Good for you. Good for you. I love this. How about you, Chris Ann? I know you've got some nuggets of wisdom.
Well, ditto to both of that. I mean, it's just amazing. And I think it's probably going back to those roles again, you know, and the things we want to do. And I do find that there is a grief process in giving up all of those and setting some boundaries. I am no longer the sister I want to be or the daughter that I want to be. Those roles, sometimes I can, but I'm not consistent, and I'm, you know, I could be good one day and not the other. So that unpredictability is really, that's a hard one for me. I find that, you know, our senses are so high, and we take the stress, and it'd be good, bad, or ugly stress. So, but bright lights, loud noises, crowds, going out to eat, you know, you can't talk because I choke. So I'm very careful about what I order, or that, you know, people understand that. And I need to sit over in the quiet. areas. So, but those boundaries have to be set, but I've tried to adapt it. So I wear sunglasses and earmuffs or earplugs when I'm going to a basketball game. I take a nap if I know something great, something I want to do. I just ordered an ice vest. I'm hoping, because our autonomic nervous systems are so impacted. So I'm hoping I can be outdoors this summer somewhat. So it's adjusting, but I think a friend of mine, Joanna, says it best. I'm living the best life. I'm living my best life now.
Good for you. That's excellent. We didn't get through every single question, but what was really funny is you guys kind of wove in the other questions about being dismissed and about your shift in perspectives. So, and I wanted to give you a chance to give any last words of wisdom before we bring Dr. Bayram back on and take some questions. So anything that you want to share with the audience that you didn't get a chance to?
I have to look at all my notes because,
Absolutely. I feel like
we
you
were
guys just have this
reminded
treasure
we-
trove of knowledge.
This is a chapter in our lives. And I think that's important to understand. We're not in stage. And if anything out there, I would ask you all to help us change that stigma of who we are. We're very capable. We're very productive. We're still who we are with adaptations.
Yes. And you guys, for the audience, I just wanted to say really quickly, just so you know, we do get comments and questions a lot about, we've been showing people that are in earlier stages. When are we going to show late stage? We're definitely going to have some conversations coming up around that. But just so you know, that's kind of the stereotype of dementia, is that people are older and male, just like you heard. And so we're trying to kind of bust that stigma. And I want you guys to see people living with this as people living with it, not just end or late stages of dementia. That's just one aspect. So thank you.
Julia, to add to that, if we do have, we're on, all of us are on other panels too, and we do have people sometimes that are farther along, and we don't leave them behind.
No,
We
absolutely.
We help them.
Absolutely.
We help each other.
I want to add one
Can I
quick
tag
thing.
on to, oops, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Donna,
kind
and
of
then we'll let Linda jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just kind of in general, I think it's important for friends, and I know Christine and I have been over this in a different discussion, but just kind of, it's important, I think, with Lewy Body to meet us where we are, because everything varies from day to day. And I want to be myself, and I want to, on the days that I'm able to, and I worry about my husband having to take care of me and losing that wife partner quality, even though I know it's coming. So I think and even like with friendships, just meet us where we're at and let us be the person that we are that day, because it's so fluctuating and it can be so frustrating because we know that we're not our best self. I know if I'm stuttering, if I am saying something that's not right, it will come to me in a minute. But I just think it's important to embrace who we are in that moment, because we know that it's going away. And so when we're having a good moment, to kind of still celebrate, because we're still the person that we are. We're just struggling with different things that are way out of our control. And so, there's a lot of jokes that are made. I've told my husband, when I can't do it, you're going to have to fix my hair. And his response is, I'll just tell you it looks good and you'll never know. So he's probably right, but we laugh when we can, because I think you can get so absorbed in what is coming that you're missing what's here and who we are right now.
Well said, my dear. That was beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Linda, go ahead. Share with us what you wanted to add.
The stigma issue, that's one of the most troubling things for me. When I was first diagnosed with this is going to sound terrible, but forgive me. I said to myself, it would be easier if I had cancer, because people have more compassion for those who have cancer.
And understanding. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
more understanding.
because you can
what
see
they,
it.
yes, and what they think about people with dementia is a joke. It's not funny. It's not fun. I was telling my son the other day, I was watching a TV show and I had to stop watching it because part of it was a mystery kind of TV show, and part of it was in a care home for dementia patients, and they apparently thought it was funny that these older people would come out and repeat themselves and not know what they were talking about. And I thought, that's not entertaining. They wouldn't make fun of cancer patients like that. So back to my point, the stigma is one of the toughest things for me, which is why I rarely share with anyone that I have this disease.
Yeah, well said. Well, I think that you all did an amazing job at busting and breaking a lot of those stigmas today with your amazing insights and comments. And so I want to thank you all, and I want to bring Dr. Bayram back in, and we'll take some questions from the audience. Hey, Ece, welcome back. All right. So we'll start with this first question here for Dr. Bayram. So the first woman is asking, my understanding is that African-American men are less likely to be diagnosed with Lewy body and more likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's men with Lewy body are more likely to be diagnosed late. African-American men, with Lewy body are more likely to be diagnosed late and are not a subject of concentrated research. Do you feel that those observations are accurate, Dr. Bayram?
Absolutely. I didn't touch on the ethnic racial components too much, but they are absolutely more underrepresented. And I can't even imagine, I know Pamela asked about men, but even for women, I can't even imagine an African-American woman going to the clinic and hearing that, hey, we have no research on you. We don't know how the disease is going to look for you. We have no idea how it's going to progress for you. And you have to realize a lot of these diagnoses usually get made at the primary care provider's office, unless you have resources to seek specialized care through behavioral neurologist, movement disorder specialist at tertiary care places. So those primary care providers may not be aware of Lewy body dementia even. A lot of people are aware of Alzheimer's disease because it's been advertised a lot. We are very aware of what Alzheimer's disease is. We're getting more aware of what Parkinson's disease is too. And accordingly, you see people get diagnosed with those diseases more and more. It doesn't mean they didn't exist before. Parkinson's affects everyone. Lewy body dementia can affect everyone. We do see it in different ethnic racial groups too, but those people don't get to hear that diagnosis just because there's more knowledge about the other diagnoses, and they get slapped onto those underrepresented communities in research because we don't know. And a lot of the African-American men, women have that risk. Hispanic people have that risk. I'm not even talking about Asian Americans or Native Americans, Pacific Islanders. I mean, we know nothing. It's pretty scary. I think it's a big gap. It's horrifying to me. It freaks me out that someone's going to show up at my door. They're going to ask me, and I'm going to be like, I know nothing about what your experience may be. It's terrifying. And I don't want to take up too much and speak to the diagnosis process too, but I just want to say that I hope, even if you're underrepresented in research right now, even though the diagnostic criteria are not working in your favor right now, I hope you at least are aware that there's a lot of push for it. There's a lot of push for diversity. There's a lot of push for understanding experiences of the underrepresented communities in research. And there are a lot of researchers dedicated to it. So for now, we may not know much, but we're going to get there. We're really hustling for you. You know, we're really, really out there trying our best to understand your needs and serve your needs better.
Absolutely. Well said. There was another question, you guys, for Chris-Anne, Donna, and Linda, wondering if you did a DAT scan or a lumbar puncture, like a spinal tap, in your diagnosis procedure at all.
Yes,
Linda?
I did a DAT scan, which was the final test before we actually said, yeah, that's Lewy, but not the lumbar puncture and not the skin biopsy.
Gotcha.
I've done them all several times. I participate in an observational trial because I'm older than Donna, even though I am still considered young onset, anything below younger than 65. I think that's something else that needs to change. So to me, it's not a big deal at all. It has helped in the last 5 years. So much has been learned about Lewy body disease and I feel really good about being able to contribute to that new information. And I need to go back to what Ece said, and that is, yes, I think things are changing, and we are looking at more diversity and young onset too. But I still think there is a huge opportunity for young onset and women, and expanding our interventional clinical trials to women of normal BMI, but lower body weights, because oftentimes that can be a cutoff. And that's a problem. I'm thrilled for the advocacy that is out there and changing it, but we need more. Yes, big time.
Anything you want to add, Donna?
I'm sorry.
Yes. No, go ahead.
I've just had a normal, or like a PET scan, not the DAT scan, and I haven't done the skin biopsy.
Gotcha. And you guys too, go ahead, Chris-Anne, you wanted to add something.
I wanted to say, this disease is weird. My scans are all good, but my clinical symptoms absolutely are Lewy. And I was part of a study that looked at AI and comparing scans from, time to time, and we're certain of what I have. But it was really the cognitive testing that was so definitive for me. And that, I tell a joke, we all know what study, the tests are now. So it's 1 to A or A to 1, anyway, B to 2, C to 3. And I argued with the poor person giving me administering the test. You've left out number 3. There is no number 3. And that's part of it. We don't see what's right in front of us sometimes. Like say, now I have husband looking in the refrigerator disease. And so again, there are things that we don't always fit the straight criteria. The ambiguity of this disease is very real.
Absolutely. And, I was going to say something too, that many years ago, when I remember a patient of mine asked me, who had Parkinson's, a woman, she said, do you think that my menstrual symptoms could impact my Parkinson's symptoms? And at the time there was like nothing on it. And I said, I can't imagine that it wouldn't. It was like hormones impact everything with our brains. And I mean, the brain fog even is real with menopause and things like that. So how would it not interact? And now there's a great group of women. If you guys are interested in this topic out there, Rochelle Flanagan, Sonia Mathur. There's different people in the Parkinson's community that are really looking at this. They even have a symptom tracker. So they're really looking at how their Parkinson's symptoms maybe correlate with different, hormonal symptoms. So there's some great work going on out there in all of these. And like I said, the Women's Brain Foundation too is looking at this across neurological diagnoses. Ece, anything that you want to add to that? Because I know you're really in this space of gender and neurology. Anything else that you want people to know?
Well, I do think that hormones play a major role, because I'm always obsessed with that age balance thing, because, like females are protected somehow up until a certain age. And then after that age 75, you see the shift. So I do think the hormones come into play at that. And we definitely see fluctuations in the way people experience their symptoms based on their menstruation periods and how that is. And people go through such a big shift in the way they experience their symptoms with menopause too. And it is a clinical observation. We are working on it. We do see it happening, but there's still the research that needs to be done to actually better understand that.
See, I'm curious about that too, if I can just add in the side, because my mom and I were, like, I was 30 when I had a hysterectomy, a complete hysterectomy, and my mom did too. And she had a really rapid decline. And I've always wondered if there's a correlation between early hysterectomies or just something in the shift of those hormones. There's so many variables that could be considered, but just as an afterthought.
Absolutely. And I do think there's some, I know I'm not saying this is best practice or anything, but I know I've seen, research and information suggesting that some people even think that maybe women doing hormone replacement therapy with menopause could be somehow protective for the brain. We don't know, but it's one of those questions that, like, if you maybe give hormones a little bit longer, could that protect the brain? So I think this is going to be part of a larger conversation for a very long time. And with that, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank the audience. I'm going to give our little closing remarks here, but keep everybody on with me. So once again, thank you all so much for sharing. This has been such a meaningful discussion. On behalf of the Lewy Body Dementia Association, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. And I'd like to thank Dr. Ece Bayram for sharing your research and your passion with us, Chris Ann Moss, Linda Dominguez, and Donna Denham for empowering us all with your thoughts and insight. You guys are absolutely amazing. As a reminder to the audience, in about a week, you're going to receive an email with the link for the recording of this so you can watch it again or share it with all your friends and families. And you'll also get resource links for different things that we've shared today as well. We invite you to check out our events calendar frequently at the bottom of the homepage on our website for details of registration for upcoming events. And mark your calendars for our next webinar on Tuesday, June 18th at 2:00. You guys have been asking for this one in those surveys. You think I don't read them, but that's why you got to do them, because I do, because we're covering autonomic symptoms in Lewy body dementia with Dr. Shannon Chiu. And then later in the month of June, we'll be talking about those end-of-life challenges with Dr. Melissa Armstrong. So I do listen when you tell me what you want to hear. So with that, take a moment to complete that survey and tell me the other things you want to hear about. And I hope to see you all again in the near future. Thank you all so much for joining me today.